Good morning, I'm Steve Johnson. We're here today to talk about product management, particularly in Agile environments, and the joy and pain of that. But let's start with this story. Robin, the product owner, came into work one day looking pretty frazzled. And her dev team said, hey, what's wrong? You look really in a mess. And she said, oh, what a day I've already had. I woke up this morning, got in my car, drove 2 blocks, and the car died. And no matter what I did, I couldn't get it started. Then I went to call my husband, but my cell phone was dead. The battery was dead. So I walked back 2 blocks in my high heels and got home and found my husband at home kissing my neighbor. What am I going to do? And her lead developer said, well, I've got a phone charger in my office. So it's critical to prioritize. If you start talking about multiple features or multiple issues, it's always important to prioritize the most important one. Another quick one, my wife and I had our kitchen redone a few years ago, and the designer came in and he saw that we had a KitchenAid mixer sitting on the floor, and he said, hey, we can make a shelf dedicated to the KitchenAid mixer. And he said, it's really cool. I've never done one, but I've heard it's really cool. Let's design one of those in. And so we agreed that was a good idea. And so the shelf came and the cabinets came, and he put in the shelf, and then he called us over for a quick demo. He'd never seen one, I'd never seen one, she'd never seen one, so it was really cool. And he took it out of the shelf, and it snapped into counter height, so you're ready to use it, and then you clean everything up and you put it all back. Very cool. And he said, okay, Susan, you try it. And she pulled it out, snapped it into place. This is really cool. And then he's like, Steve, you try it. And I pulled it out, and I went, but hang on, where's the power? And he went, oh, good one. The old days would have been, hey, you didn't specify power, there's not going to be no power. Instead, because he was agile in the way he dealt with us, he said, you know what? You can't anticipate every requirement months in advance. You got to be able to adjust to reality. He had never done one of these before. I had never done one of these before. We didn't have enough domain experience, if you will, to know that we needed power. But of course, as soon as we see it, duh, of course you need power, right? And so what's been brilliant about a lot of the teams that I've been working with over the years is we can adapt to changing requirements in a way today that we never could before. And yet, many of the executives I deal with are missing the good old days, as they like to think of them. In the good old days, we had a roadmap, and we blocked out our schedule, and then we always shipped feature complete on schedule. Do you remember those days? That's right, they didn't exist. We've totally forgotten that the waterfall days failed as we look back through our rose-colored glasses, I suppose. What's wonderful about so many of the techniques you'll hear about this week and at other conferences you attend is we need to be adapting to changing requirements. And before I go any further, how many of you would say product management is well understood in your organization? Product management, well understood. Okay, interesting. Well, we're going to talk about that today. Okay? Companies can be agile according to Lean Startup, but the challenge is, with today's method, we can also build the wrong product faster than ever. And how many enterprise software products in particular look like this? Let's just add another knife. Let's just add another blade. Let's just add another corkscrew. Let's just add, oh, we've got this thing, this piece of code from over there, or we've got this service from over there, and we slap this thing together, and it's ugly as sin. And it's unusable. Does that sound, not like at your company, but at other companies you've encountered? Like every single expense reporting product on the planet? So what we need is just enough process. What's brilliant about so many techniques today is We've come up with better ways of prioritizing, better ways of vetting, better ways of choosing what's in and what's out, and we need just enough process. But unfortunately, so many of the teams that I work with have focused all their energies on product. The product managers, formerly product managers, now have become product owners. They've been pulled into the development effort, and we never see them again. And the original idea of product owners was brilliant. I mean, basically, the originators of that concept said, we've never met a product manager we liked, so let's come up with our own title and not call it product manager anymore, so we don't have to deal with those jerks. And then the product owners came in and everybody said, okay, well now product owner sounds an awful lot like product manager, let's just make product managers product owners, and so the same people stayed in the role. And got pulled into daily operations with development. Does that sound familiar? And then periodically, the developers say, what's going on in the market? What's happening with competitors? What's going on with revenue? What's going on in the rest of the business? And the typical product owner says, I have no idea. I've been sitting next to you for the last 6 months reading aloud from Jira. So we need to remember that product management is a much bigger view than just product. It's understanding what business are we in, what markets are we serving, and we turn that into product. Maybe it's software, maybe it's services, maybe it's a combination, maybe it's hardware. We also have to extend our view into how we're going to promote the product, how we're going to sell the product, how we're going to operate the product down the road. And the part that I think is brilliant from all of the Agile methods I've worked with is the concept of the retrospective, except we only seem to do a retrospective on our process. Shouldn't we also do a retrospective on our business and our markets? Looking at a year down the road, were the people we thought going to buy this product the ones who actually did? And were there some people that we wish hadn't bought our product? Sometimes the product is attractive to the wrong people. And one of the things we can do in a retrospective is build that profile of what the ideal customer looks like and explicitly call out, we don't want customers who look like this. My dentist does this. He's kind of a mean-spirited old guy, I guess, but he's looked at the success profile of customers, and there's one kind of customer he has that drives him insane, and so he has canceled their appointments. I live outside Washington, D.C. in Virginia, and so going from where I am to anywhere else takes an hour. Doesn't matter where you're going, it's at least an hour. You guys know what that's like. And anyway, his problem, my dentist's problem, is a lot of people don't cancel their appointments. If they're going to cancel, they just don't show up. And he can't resell that hour. And so it's one of those, one time shame on you, 2 times shame on me. And the 3rd time he says, I no longer accept your business. Are there any customers that you'd like to fire? We can do that when we look at the retrospective. I'm working with this one particular team. They've got a customer who calls 47 times a month with problems. And they're like, how are we going to support this guy? And I said, well, we're either going to start charging him by the call or we're going to discontinue his license. And they were like, oh, we could never do that. Why not? He's costing you more money than he's generating. Doing that retrospective, not just on process, but on our business goals and on our market results, is as well part of product management. The concern, again, is that so often we get pulled into product operations. We fail to look beyond that. So, what would you say you do here? If you don't recognize this screen capture, you totally want to go watch this movie. It's Office Space. It's like the only movie of all time that I'm aware of that has a product manager in it. And not a very flattering portrayal, in my view, either. But these are the Bobs. They've come in to re-engineer or to optimize or do business something or another, and everybody has to come in and interview for their jobs. And one of my buds posted on LinkedIn a similar question. What is product management in one sentence? And this thread has been going on for about 4 months. It's got thousands of responses that all disagree with one another. One thing that's particularly interesting is the number of people who perceive themselves as product managers as responsible for creating products. I'm not sure creating is the right term or building is the right term, but we'll come to that in a second. What would you say you do here? And what's the difference between a product manager and a product owner? Teams that have been successful implementing Agile methods, particularly Scrum, have found that these are different roles. One is internally facing, one is externally facing. And the profile is, if all we have is product owners, guess is we're probably not doing much of that out in the market stuff that a lot of product managers are supposed to be doing. And the other challenge is, so many people rely on product management for expertise, and here's why. My development friends say, I don't understand why our salespeople don't know the product as well as we do. And that's because most product teams only work on 1 or 2 products, and they can go really deep on those products. They have lots and lots of expertise. Meanwhile, our salespeople carry more than just 1 product. They carry dozens of products. Larger companies, hundreds of products. If you had hundreds of products to carry, would you understand that all the subtleties of all the different products? Or would it be more like you'd be lucky to know the names of the products? And so what happens is the salespeople go into the field with the names of the product and a price list, and as soon as they need help, they can't call development because development and salespeople can't seem to talk to one another, so they call the nearest product manager. And the product manager then reads aloud to them from SharePoint. Here's the, there is an ROI tool. Let me read it aloud to you, or let me forward this to you right off of SharePoint. And as we grow, we start finding more subtlety in these roles of product management. There's a need for market expertise in product management. Sometimes that's called a product marketing manager. Sometimes it's called a market owner or a marketing manager. There's a business role of product management. There's a technology role of product management. And these are different heads. These are different kinds of people than you can find in just all one person, right? And what's missing here is the 4th expertise. I find 3 different expertises in people I work with. The technical, the business, the market. What's missing is the 4th one, which is domain. I don't think you can do product management unless you appreciate the domain you're in. I have a friend who works for an education company. They target their product to school teachers. They've got a new consumer product that's really interesting, and it's targeted to homeschoolers. Does anybody know anybody homeschooling? Yeah. It turns out homeschooling may be one of the most effective ways to educate our children. And if you're related to a teacher, you're hating what I'm saying right now. I get that. Here's the problem this company's having. They've got a product designed for teachers. They're trying to repackage it for homeschoolers. And the people they have doing the repackaging are themselves former teachers. Can you see anything wrong in this story? Teachers hate homeschoolers. I'm a teacher, for God's sake, right? I went to college. I have an education. I joined a union, right? I'm a teacher. Those parents are amateurs. But it turns out, the latest research is, it's the one-to-one or the 1-to-2 relationship that homeschoolers have with their kids that the real successes are coming from. The real point being, if we're going to build a product designed for a specific persona like a homeschooling parent, we probably ought to have some people on our team who actually like those personas. So here are 3 types of expertise. Here's the 4th, is the 3rd column there is domain. We've often got business skills like analysis and research and pricing and planning. There are market skills, either vertical or geographic. There are technology skills such as use scenarios and key capabilities and future capabilities and competitive landscape. But what's missing in so many teams is the domain experience. There's a subtlety between domain and market, which is why I put them together. But this is what most sales teams rely on for from product management. I have a friend who was hired as a product manager. His background was banking. He had been a vice president at a bank and had created an algorithm to detect fraud. He came to this company to develop that acronym, that domain expertise that he had, to develop the technology into a product. But the word went out that we had hired a former VP from a bank. And before you know it, the sales team is calling this guy to go on sales calls with them, completely unrelated to fraud, but related to, you can talk bank. And so for 9 months, he supported the sales team with his market knowledge rather than his domain knowledge, and then left the company to go to another company to develop his domain information into a product. It's particularly funny when you look at job postings for a product manager. They often read like a Superman. I want somebody, frequently I see job postings like, we want an MBA, we want a computer science undergrad, we want 20 or 30 years in the industry, and we're willing to pay, nothing for it. I got one the other day that was particularly funny. They were looking for somebody with 15 years of social media experience. How's that working for you? And so we end up looking for the impossible. We look for somebody who is a business expert and a market expert and a technology expert and a domain expert all in one person. There's an awful lot of baggage going on there, right? And if you turn it around and you start looking at the other departments inside a typical software company, whether it's internal IT or a software vendor, you have lots of different people who rely on product management for this domain expertise, for the technology expertise, maybe as well the market expertise. And so if you go to our friends in sales and say, what do you need from product management? They say, I need somebody to go on sales calls with me and explain the product and explain the domain. And if you go talk to marketing people, they say, well, product management is where I get screenshots from. And if you go to development and say, what is product management for? They go, yeah, I'm not really sure. They have something to do with business, but they never seem to know about it. So I just get them, to groom the backlog. But if you talk to executives, executives say, I'm expecting product management to be my representative at the product level, to be making business decisions, to be looking at market choices, to be informing others who work on the product so they can use their judgment. Personas are really popular right now, for instance. Personas aren't an end goal. I mean, it's not, ooh, wow, look, we have a persona document, let me publish it. The real point of a persona is it allows others to use their judgment. If you understand the background of the person you're building products for, then you can use your judgment when it comes down to, should I make it easy or should I make it fast? Right? So as we look for this perfect person that doesn't exist, what we typically actually find is we find often a domain expert who is also a technology expert. Or we may find a business expert who is also a market expert. Trying to find all of that expertise in one person is extremely difficult. And so if you run a team, this is a tool to help you profile, if that's the right word, assess the people you work with. Ask them to write down their name on a Post-it note and put it on this parallelogram and say, where do you really think your strength lies? And we find some people say, well, I tend to be more business focused, or I tend to be more technology focused, or I tend to be more market or domain focused. And then there's always one nut job in your department who says, oh, I'm good at everything, and puts this little thing in the middle. And what we find is people tend to gravitate to these two triangles. Everybody needs domain expertise, and everybody has to have a sense of what the business is. But some of us are more internally facing and are more technology oriented, and some of us are more market facing, more interested in supporting the sales and marketing efforts and understanding customers. Instead of looking for the perfect individual, let's build a well-rounded staff of people that we can supplement one another's skills. So what is product management? It's a combination of these things, and it's probably not just one person. And there's an overlay here of domain. The old saw is that, a good manager can manage anything, but that hasn't been my experience. Has it been yours? There are so many subtleties to the domain of legal or healthcare or fraud that you can't easily pick up. If you do find yourself in a position where you are responsible for a domain you're not that familiar with, it means there's a lot of education you have to go through over the first 3 to 6 months to get up to speed so you can have cogent conversations with others. But the real question, I think, is this one. So many executives say to me, how large should a product management department be? And the answer is, well, who's been hiding their head count in the product management budget? As we adopt Agile methods in development, we need technical skills, business skills, market knowledge, domain knowledge, these expertises we need to serve up to development. And maybe development hires product owners or business analysts, or maybe product management provides that function, but there's a headcount. The same is true with sales engineers. Do you know this role, sales engineers? You've got a direct sales force on a complex product. 2 people go on a sales call. One of them drives the car. One of them knows the product. Right? The second one there is the sales engineer. There's a funny thing in our industry. We love to talk about best practices. And the problem is common practices and best practices are different things. And so the common practice is in vendors, there's typically 1 sales engineer supporting 4 salespeople. That's a common practice. Best practices tends to be 1 product manager, 1 sales engineer supports 2 salespeople. And at large companies, we often find 1 sales engineer for every sales rep. If you've got a technical product, a complex product sold through a direct sales force, likely you're going to need some pretty technical resources in the field, and without it, they rely on product management. The salespeople need domain expertise from somewhere, right? And then finally, the same is true for for marketing. More and more marketing teams are relying on their own product marketing managers to be product experts in the marketing department. But the trick is they actually have to be experts. So one of the rules that I use is I change the word manager to expert and see if the title still works, or see if the person still has those skills. A product marketing expert, therefore, should be expert on marketing products. Furthermore, they should be expert on product. And yet, it's sad how often that is not the case. I have a friend who has a SaaS-based product. She had a sit-down recently with her product marketing managers, and they said, well, can you explain this to us? And she did, and it became clear to her as she was explaining it that they had never used it. And she's like, well, why don't you just log on and play with it? And they're like, well, we don't have access. So they're trying to market a product they've never seen. No wonder it's difficult, right? So a product marketing team can be small if other departments hire people to provide that product knowledge that the developers, the salespeople, the marketing people need. So as we implement product management in our organizations, here's a 9-step process. It starts with responsibilities. What's the product owner? What's the product manager? What's the product marketing manager responsible for? Let's write down all those activities and then say, okay, you're going to do this, and you're going to do this, and you're going to do this. One of the biggest challenges we continue to see, those of us who have ever done any consulting, is the problem of, well, it's basically the problem of divorced parents. A child comes to one parent and says, can we do this and so? And the parent says, well, no, absolutely not. So they go to the other parent, and the other parent says, well, I want you to love me again, so yes, let's go to Disneyland. And sales teams do that with product managers all the time. They go to they get one answer. If they don't like it, they go to another product manager or product marketing manager to get the answer. So we need to have clarity on roles and responsibilities. We need to have clarity on our planning process beyond Scrum, beyond our Kanban, beyond our product planning. What are all the steps to go from ideation to retrospective? And then we'll meet our market by actually being in the market. How in the world can somebody who is in the building all the time understand what the requirements are from the market? There's a story about GE X-rays. GE made an X-ray film, an X-ray machine years ago, and that business is all about the consumables, just like printers, right? I recently bought a laser color printer, a color laser printer, and I was astounded at the price. It was only $300. And then a couple of weeks went by, and I said, well, I probably ought to go ahead and get some more, toner for when that time comes, because it's going to, stop working at 3 o'clock in the morning when Staples isn't open. So I went over to Staples and I bought the toner for $300. I have a friend who hates the earth because he buys a new printer every time. But anyway, that's the way printers work, that's the way razor blades work, that's the way X-ray film works. You get a discounted price on the X-ray, and then you pay for the film. So the product manager was doing a retrospective on the business and started seeing this drop in the number of consumables purchased. He went to interview doctors. He went to interview X-ray technicians to find out why they weren't ordering more film. And they admitted, well, we're now ordering film from another supplier. It's actually the same price. But that other supplier had figured out something about doctors. You're looking at an X-ray, you hold it up to the light, and it's not clear which is the front or the back or the top or the bottom. And so they hold up the X-ray, and then they turn it the other way, and then they look at the back, and they're like, oh, well, here's your lungs. I found your heart, And it doesn't inspire confidence with the patient. More than that, it embarrasses you again with the other doctors. So their competitor started putting out film for the X-ray machine that had watermarked on it this side up, so the doctor could instantly orient it. It's a tiny little thing. It would not possibly have occurred unless someone had been in the field and seen this behavior. So we do quantitative interviews in the market, and then we back them up with quantitative information as a result of a survey or some form of A/B testing. Then we prioritize based on math. I was at the San Francisco airport recently. I was sitting next to a young guy with a set of index cards, and he was shuffling them around, and I knew what he was doing. And I leaned over to him and I said, are you grooming your backlog? And he just thought, wow, this is a weird conversation. How many people would know that's what I'm doing? And I went, yeah, well, we're both here, for Nerd World, right? So anyway, he's flipping through his stuff, prioritizing. And I said, what method are you using? And he said, well, I just know this one's more important than that one. You know it? We should be doing this with a little bit of math, shouldn't we? Like, how important is this problem to the customer? How satisfied are they with their existing solution? How much is it going to cost us to build? I mean, these are some pretty simple questions. And there should be a method by which we prioritize. And then, one of those methods actually is understanding the people who buy your products and the people who use their products. And they're different, aren't they? You've heard the phrase, eat your own dog food. Well, let's take a step back from that. Buyers of dog food don't use dog food. Users of dog food don't buy dog food. And if they did, it would be a very different product, right? If the users were the evaluators, then dog food would be a bag of stuff I found in the yard, right? When in fact, the buyer wants to hear that this is almost human food, right? You read the bag of dog food and you just go, man, this sounds kind of yummy. It's heart healthy, it maintains their weight, gosh, I think maybe I need some of that. And so there's a big difference between the people who buy your product and the people who use your products. One more quick one. I was talking to somebody recently who turned out to be someone in human resources, and she was telling me what kind of requirements the product managers had for workshops. And it was like, I'm at least one level, if not two levels removed from the actual people who are going to consume this deliverable. I really need to talk to some real people. And I think I said real people, and then I completely had to apologize. But anyway, they were buyers, but they weren't users, and they were trying to express the user requirements to me in a way that didn't really work. Anyway, furthermore, we need to learn to write clear requirements by whatever form. Stories, user stories, job stories, market stories, product stories, and then position it to the buyer. We build products for users. We build positioning or messaging for buyers. And then finally, add to all of your planning this idea of let's do a retrospective, not just on process, but on markets and business. So before, product management was focused pretty much on product. Nowadays, we're extending our view to the whole life cycle, from ideation all the way to retrospective. And this way of thinking serves as a pretty handy way as well of identifying what the minimum set of artifacts are to get from here to there. You need some. We need something more than a cocktail napkin, but perhaps a lot less than the old school MRD, PRD, business plan, product plan, that kind of stuff. And this metaphor serves us well in another way, and that is it can be a handy scorecard with KPIs all along the way, like this. Product management has to change to work better in Agile environments. Agile's wonderful. It allows us to adapt to changing requirements. It separates us from the fiction that we could anticipate requirements months in advance, that what we do in development is factory work when in fact it is not. To make change in our organization, people need to know why they're changing. The second step is they have to have the skills, tools, and coaching to make those changes. And most of all, people they respect must support the change. So if you're trying to make change in your organization by adopting Agile or adopting a more business-oriented view of product management, keep these three steps in mind. The trickiest one is the third one. There are lots of back to the first one, there are lots of good reasons for adopting a more cogent view of product management. And some of the sessions you'll see later on today will drill down on those very points. The second step is easy too. There's lots of good training available. There are lots of good books available. There's lots of good coaching available. The hard part in most organizations is getting the executive team on board. I'm convinced that most of Agile came from pushback against poor management. It seems that our managers had no idea what they wanted. So we would spend 6 months or 9 months or 12 months building a product, and we'd present it to management, and management would say, well, okay, that's cute and all, but that's not what I thought we were going to get. And after a few times of that, we finally said, you know what, I'm going to work for a week, I'm going to show you where you are, and you're going to say get yay or nay, and then we'll keep moving. So much of the techniques I see are really about controlling management, isn't it? I've written about this in my ebook called From Fragile to Agile, but I have one more story before we go, talking about the 4 types of expertise, talking about how product management works in Agile teams, talking about the business of the product. These are the topics that I cover in my book called From Fragile to Agile. But let me wrap up with this story. One of the key ideas from most Agile methods is the minimal viable product, which my friend Saeed Khan declares in his Devil's Dictionary, that's the least we can possibly do. We build products that are just barely functional and say, look, it's MVP, we shipped it. Like this. Every time I've seen a thermostat like this, there's been a sign either over it or next to it. The sign over it says, do not touch, right? The sign next to it is 2 or 3 or 4 pages of how to work the thing. And when I talk to people, they go, you know, I'm perfectly good with mine. I had one of these, right? And it's so easy. You press the schedule button, and then you specify all this stuff, and it's actually kind of straightforward if you're a developer. But this one is just straightforward. In a shocking cost, I replaced our perfectly functional thermostats with the Nest thermostat, and for the first time, my wife is happy. I'm sure there's a big story there, but I'm not going to do it. And so, MVP isn't enough. We want to build products that people are delighted to have, that are fun to use. One fun thing about this product is the letters are big. When I get up in the morning, I don't have my glasses on. I can still see the screen. Oh, and just to help me out, it notices I'm standing in front of it and turns on the light. They thought through all the use scenarios instead of saying, well, what's the least we can possibly do? So most organizations need a small number of living documents. I'm like all Agilists. I despise dead trees, right? Let's not build a whole bunch of things that we're not going to use. But we do need some. We need a nimble planning process, and frankly, most teams, the product management team needs what we call a product playbook. Here's step 1, step 2, step 3. Here's how we write stories here. Here's how we write personas here. Here's how we write whatever here. And to create a world-class product management organization, we need clarity on organizational structures, we need clarity on roles and responsibilities, and we should audit the process and artifacts we have today and make sure communication is taking place. If a cocktail napkin meets the needs of your executive team, then that's enough. If a user story of, as a role, I want to, so I can, if that communicates, great, hallelujah. But let's look at all those processes and make sure we're not doing them for the sake of paper. We're doing it for the sake of communication. If you'd like to stay in touch with me, here's my coordinates, Steve Johnson. You can contact me on email or through Twitter. I'm sjohnson717, which is my birthday, because S. Johnson was already taken. So if you do this July 17th, I hope you'll send me a tweet or give me a call. If you want a copy of this presentation, please bring me your business card. Thank you. We're going to do a 10-minute shift change and let Arnie